Imagine stepping onto an airplane. You settle into your seat, the engines hum, and, well, you just implicitly trust that this massive piece of machinery is safe, that it's ready to fly. But who is it exactly that keeps that trust grounded, keeps it flying safely?
Those are the aircraft maintenance engineers, or AMEs. Yeah, they really are the unsung heroes, sort of behind the scenes. They
Right.
don't just fix things. They're the final human checkpoint, the ultimate gatekeepers of safety for every single flight.
And in Canada, their world is governed by this dense, critical rule book, the Canadian Aviation Regulations, the CAR-Rs. For this deep dive, we've been digging into the sources you shared, official documents from Transport Canada about the AME license and exams, and also a really fascinating firsthand account from an AME talking about actually tackling the regulations exam itself.
Yeah, that was interesting. So our mission today really is to pull out the most important insights from all this material. We want to understand the absolutely crucial role AMEs play, the intricate rules they follow within that CARS framework, and, well, what it actually means to hold that vital license.
Sounds like a lot.
It is. It's far more than just technical knowledge. It's about immense responsibility, like obsessive attention to detail, and why every single rule matters for the safety of everyone up there in the sky.
Okay, let's really get into this then. The core task of an aircraft maintenance engineer, it goes way beyond just turning wrenches, right?
Yeah.
What is the fundamental privilege, the sort of unique responsibility that sets them apart?
The most important thing, their license grants according to the regulations. It isn't just the right to do the maintenance, it's the exclusive privilege to certify that maintenance work has been completed correctly.
Certify. So they are the ones who sign off saying, yes, this is airworthy, and that's regardless of whether they did the work themselves or maybe supervised someone else.
Exactly. Their main duty, as it's laid out right there in the regs, is to determine and certify the standard to which aircraft maintenance has been completed. They are the last line of defense, the final check before an aircraft flies.
Okay. And because of that, they're kind of like connection points throughout the whole aviation system.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They hand off certified aircraft to pilots. They report key info to the regulator. Transport Canada, they work within approved maintenance organizations, AMOs, and they share critical safety data.
Right, and that safety data often comes through service difficulty reports, or SDRs.
SDR.
Think of them as the formal system for reporting specific component issues or, failures they find during maintenance.
Ah, okay. Like a formal bug report, but for airplane parts.
Precisely, yeah. And all of this work, it ties back to one big concept: airworthiness.
Airworthy.
The regulations are very clear that an aircraft isn't just airworthy forever. It's an ongoing challenge to maintain that state. The ultimate question the whole system asks is this aircraft fundamentally in the same safe condition as the day it left the factory?
Wow.
And the AME is the person with the authority and the responsibility to answer that question by certifying the maintenance.
That's a huge responsibility. Just immense. Now, you mentioned the rule book, the CAR-Rs. It sounds incredibly detailed. What exactly makes up the Canadian Aviation Regulations?
Well, the CARs are actually structured into two main parts. You've got the regulations, which tell you what you must do, and then the standards, which tell you how you must do it to meet that requirement.
Okay, the what and the how.
Exactly. They work together. And using the online version is really helpful because it actually links the what directly to the how. Makes it much easier to navigate.
And who has to follow these rules? Is it just the big airlines with their massive jets?
No, not at all. The CARs apply to all civil aircraft operating in Canada. That's everything from small private planes, training aircraft, even balloons and gliders, all the way up to the largest commercial jet transports and helicopters.
Really? Balloons too?
Yep. It's a single framework covering a huge range of aircraft types. What it doesn't cover are things like military aircraft, purely model aircraft, rockets, or hovercraft.
That's a much broader scope than I might have guessed.
Okay.
And how are they organized so you can actually find anything in there?
They're structured pretty logically, actually, into parts and subparts. So, for instance, Part 4 is all about personnel licensing, and within that, Subpart 403 specifically details the requirements and privileges for aircraft maintenance engineers.
Gotcha. Part 4, Subpart 403 for AMEs.
Right. That structure helps you navigate what is, an immense amount of information.
So for an AME, beyond their specific subpart, what other key areas of the CARs are absolutely essential for them to know, like inside and out?
Oh, they need deep familiarity with Part V, which covers airworthiness, and especially the standards within Part V, like Standard 571, which deals with maintenance procedures in a lot of detail.
Okay, Part V, Standard 571.
Then there's Part 6, General Operating and Flight Rules. That's also critical because it includes rules about aircraft requirements and the maintenance records that pilots and owners need to keep, which, directly impacts the AME's work.
Makes sense.
And if they work for an airline, then Part 7 is key, specifically the sections on commercial air services and maintenance control systems. That's mandatory knowledge.
Okay, let's maybe hone in on that AME license itself. This is that golden ticket, right?
Sure.
The physical proof of that certification privilege issued under that Subpart 403. We saw in one of the Transport Canada documents, one of the sources, that there have been some relatively recent changes to the actual physical license card.
Yes, that's right. Transport Canada put out an advisory circular detailing updates that took effect around April 2019, I believe. These changes were largely made to harmonize Canada's AME license with international standards. The ones set by ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization.
Okay, a harmonization. So what were the most noticeable changes for the AME holding the card?
A couple of key things. They actually removed the requirement for a photo on the license card itself a bit earlier, back in 2018. But more significantly, the validity period for the license was increased from 6 years up to 10 years.
10 years. That's a substantial increase. That must simplify things quite a bit for AMEs and the administration.
Yeah, definitely.
What else changed on the card itself, the look of it?
The layout of the physical card was updated. Little things like the holder's address was removed from the front, though you still have to keep your address updated with Transport Canada in their records, obviously.
Right.
It now prominently features the full name, date of birth in a standardized format, YYYYMMDD, and citizenship using an international 3-letter code. There's also a general statement about the privileges granted by the license.
And on the back of the card, any changes there?
Yeah, they removed the detailed descriptions of the ratings, like M1 or M2 for structures or mechanics.
Ah.
That information is now just referenced as being found in the airworthiness manual. The magnetic strip was also removed, probably to make space. And in its place, they added some important statements.
Like what?
Statements about the requirement for specific aircraft type training, especially if you're working on complex transport category aircraft or turbine helicopters. And also a reference to the requirement for AMEs to meet ongoing recency requirements to keep their license valid and current.
Okay, so recency and type training are emphasized right there on the card now.
Exactly. Oh, and older rating designators like P41, they'll still be displayed but without the description.
Got it. So anyone with an older card would just get this new design the next time they needed a new card. For any reason, renewal, replacement, maybe adding a new rating.
Precisely. And Transport Canada even suggested people could renew a bit early if they wanted to get the updated version sooner.
Interesting. So while these might seem like kind of minor administrative details about a piece of plastic, they actually represent pretty significant shifts, don't they? Aligning with international norms, emphasizing ongoing training and recency.
Absolutely. They reflect the evolving nature of the profession and international standards.
So moving from the license itself to the daily grind, the actual work.
Yeah.
What are the absolute fundamental responsibilities that flow directly from holding that AME license and operating within the cars?
Well, at the heart of it is signing that maintenance release.
The maintenance release.
Yes. This is the formal legal declaration, usually made right in the aircraft's logbook, that says the maintenance work has been completed correctly and the aircraft is airworthy according to all the applicable requirements. That's laid out very clearly in the regulations.
Okay. And what are those applicable requirements? Is it just, whatever the AME thinks is best? Or...
Oh, absolutely not. No. This is where the regulations get very specific. For significant work, things like major repairs or alterations, they must use approved data.
Approved data. What does that mean exactly?
It usually means engineering data specifically approved by the aircraft manufacturer or by the regulator, Transport Canada. It's official documentation.
Okay, so approved data for the big stuff. What about more routine tasks, smaller things?
For tasks where the manufacturer's data might not specify the exact method, maybe something more generic, AMEs rely on standard industry practices.
Standard industry practices.
Yeah. And a very common reference for this, particularly for smaller aircraft, is actually an advisory circular from the FAA in the U.S., AC 43.13.
From the FAA.
Yeah, it's basically a massive handbook of accepted standardized methods for generic tasks like sheet metal repairs, riveting, wiring repairs, stuff like that, widely used.
Got it. So approved data or standard practices. What about the parts themselves? Can you just grab any part that looks like it fits off the shelf?
No, definitely not. The regulations are strict on this too. You absolutely must use approved replacement parts.
Approved parts. So approved by who?
Typically, this means parts that have been certified or approved by the original aircraft manufacturer or the regulator. It's not just about the part manufacturer saying it's okay. It's about ensuring the part is suitable and specifically approved for that specific aircraft type.
Oh, that makes sense. Everything has to work together as a certified system.
Yeah.
What about testing the work afterwards?
Oh, testing is fundamental. Absolutely. This includes specialized techniques like non-destructive testing or NDT.
NDT.
Yeah, things like dye penetrant checks to find surface cracks or eddy current testing to look for cracks or corrosion without actually damaging the component. These require specific training and certification just to perform the tests.
And weight and balance. I know that's critical for pilots.
Crucial. Any change to the aircraft's empty weight, maybe after a major repair or installing new equipment, requires a new weight and balance report to be calculated and documented.
And that needs signing off too.
Yes, that updated report needs to be formally incorporated and certified with its own maintenance release. It's absolutely critical for safe flight performance.
And you mentioned earlier that AMEs have to stay current. It's not just pass the exam once and you're good for 10 years.
Definitely not. No way. The regulations explicitly require AMEs to maintain their knowledge and skills. The study guides for the exams we looked at, they really highlight just how vast that knowledge base has to be.
Yeah.
It covers everything from basic math and physics to complex aerodynamics, aircraft systems, structures, material science, and of course, a deep, deep understanding of the regulations themselves. It's really a lifetime of learning.
Wow. Speaking of a lifetime of detail, it really sounds like meticulous record keeping is absolutely central to everything an AME does.
It is the absolute backbone of airworthiness. The entire system, it relies on detailed, accurate, and permanent technical records. The regulator, Transport Canada, needs to be able to track the status and history of every single civil aircraft in the country and know who's responsible for its maintenance.
And it's the owner who's ultimately responsible for keeping those records. Is that right?
Yes. The aircraft owner is required by law to keep a specific set of records. There's the journey log, which usually travels with the aircraft and is used by the pilots for flight details and noting snags.
Okay.
And then there are separate, much more detailed technical records for the airframe itself, for each engine, and for any variable pitch propellers. Plus, the current weight and balance report is a key part of those records.
And where are these kept? Not stuffed in the cockpit, I assume?
No, usually the detailed technical logs are kept safely at the aircraft space, maybe in the hangar or maintenance office. But they must be available if Transport Canada or someone needs to inspect them.
And the rules for making entries in these logs, are they strict?
Extremely strict. Every single entry must be accurate, legible, and permanent. That means using ink, usually, and absolutely no whiteout. If you make an error, you draw a single line through it so the original entry is still readable, then you initial the correction.
Wow, okay. No racing mistakes.
Nope. And each entry needs to be signed and dated by the certifying AME. If the records are kept electronically, there are specific rules to ensure the original data cannot be altered or deleted, and there's an audit trail.
So you mentioned the journey log and the technical logs. How do they relate day to day?
Well, maintenance work is often initially recorded in the journey log by the AME, maybe right after the work is done at the aircraft. This entry can then be transcribed into the more detailed technical log, usually within 30 days.
Transcribe?
Yeah, copy over accurately. The person doing the transcribing must be identified. But crucially, the signed entry in the technical log is considered the formal maintenance release for that work. You don't need a second signature just for transcribing.
I see. And there's even an annual report required for the owner.
Yes, aircraft owners have to submit something called an annual airworthiness information report to Transport Canada every year. It's a form that summarizes the aircraft's status, flying hours, and confirms its maintenance is up to date.
Okay. So beyond the individual AME's tasks and all that crucial record keeping, there are also broader systems for managing maintenance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially as aircraft get more complex or are used commercially.
Exactly. It's not one size fits all. For simpler, privately operated aircraft, the regulations often provide standardized maintenance schedules or templates, but for larger, more complex aircraft, or those used in commercial operations like airlines, the maintenance programs are much more detailed and customized.
How so?
While they can involve things like maintenance review boards, analyzing operational data to optimize the schedule, and they require custom maintenance schedules that have to be formally approved by the minister, by Transport Canada.
And airlines operate under an even more specific system.
Yes, absolutely. Commercial air operators, like airlines, are required to have a documented maintenance control system, or MCS. This is all laid out in their maintenance control manual, the MCM.
MCM.
This manual basically details exactly how they manage all aspects of maintenance scheduling, performing work, record keeping, quality control, and, critically, how they determine an aircraft is safe for dispatch before each flight according to their approved system.
And this MCM isn't just written once and put on a shelf.
Oh no, it's considered a living document. It must be kept completely up to date with current procedures and regulations, and any changes usually need to be approved by the regulator. Any mismatch between the approved manual and what they're actually doing, well, that can lead to very serious consequences, potentially even grounding the airline until it's fixed.
Wow, okay. That really highlights the layers of oversight involved. You mentioned SCRs earlier, the service difficulty reports. How does Transport Canada actually use that data that AME submit?
That data, which comes from AMEs all across the country reporting problems they find, is collected and analyzed by Transport Canada's experts. They look for trends, potential systemic issues, or maybe emerging safety hazards related to specific parts or procedures.
And what do they do with that analysis?
They share it back out to the industry to improve safety. This can be through safety publications, newsletters, safety letters, or, most critically, it can lead to the issuance of airworthiness directives.
Ah, ADs. Okay. Those are the mandatory repair instructions we hear about sometimes.
Yes, exactly. Airworthiness directives are mandatory actions required by the regulator to address an identified unsafe condition on a specific aircraft type or component. It's a legally binding instruction.
And whose job is it to make sure those ADs get done?
Legally, the aircraft owner is responsible for ensuring ADs are complied with. But practically speaking, it's almost always the AME who performs the required work or inspection or verifies that it's been done, and then makes the required log entries certifying that the AD has been complied with. It's a critical part of their job.
Got it. So with all these detailed rules and incredibly high stakes, what happens when things don't go according to the book? What's the system for, accountability?
Well, there's a formal compliance and enforcement process. For straightforward errors or maybe minor non-compliance, there can be administrative penalties, things like fines or perhaps a temporary suspension of the AME's license privileges.
Okay.
But for intentional violations like deliberately falsifying logbooks or signing off work that wasn't done properly, the penalties are much more severe. They can involve significant fines, long-term license suspensions, or even permanent revocation.
The source material you shared had some pretty specific and frankly kind of eye-opening examples of AME offenses, things that actually happen.
Yeah, they really illustrate the real-world consequences of not following the rules precisely. There were cases like an AME being penalized for certifying a repair on an oil leak that, well, it just wasn't done to the required standard. It still leaked. Or another case where an AME, apparently feeling pressure to get the plane out, rushed an inspection and released the aircraft before completing all the necessary log entries. That's a serious violation.
Or the instance you mentioned where an AME used the wrong material and procedure for a balloon repair, leading to a license suspension.
Yes, exactly. It shows that even on seemingly simpler aircraft like balloons, the standards still apply rigorously. There was also a very serious case of an AME certifying an imported aircraft as airworthy when in fact it had significant structural problems that weren't properly addressed.
Wow.
And other examples too, like AMEs failing to keep accurate technical records or neglecting to log mandatory airworthiness directives. These aren't just, abstract rules. These are critical safety actions, and failing to do them properly has direct consequences.
And it's not just AMEs who face accountability in this system either, is it?
Yeah.
Pilots have responsibilities related to airworthiness too.
Absolutely. The regulations hold pilots accountable as well. The sources showed examples of pilots being penalized for operating aircraft when mandatory ADs hadn't been completed, for instance, or for performing maintenance themselves beyond what they're allowed to do without the necessary certification and, crucially, without a proper AME sign-off in the logs.
So everyone's got a role.
Both AMEs and pilots are essential links in the safety chain, and both are accountable under the CARS.
And all of this exists within the context of, well, human beings doing the work. The Flight Engineer Study Guide you had mentioned human factors, things like errors in interpretation, operating pressures.
Right. The system has to account for the human element. It's unavoidable. And that Reddit post we looked at, the one about taking the CARS exam, it subtly hinted at some of those real-world pressures an AME might face. You know, maybe pressure from aircraft owners wanting work done faster or cheaper.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
Navigating those pressures while always upholding the safety standards and the regulations, that's a huge part of the AME's professional responsibility.
So how does someone actually step into this world? How do you become a certified AME in the first place? What's the path?
Well, the main path involves getting the required training and experience, often through an approved college program or apprenticeship. Then, critically, you have to pass a series of technical exams covering that broad range of knowledge we discussed, structures, systems, electronics, etc. And you also have to pass a regulatory exam specifically on the Canadian Aviation regulations.
Okay, technical exams and the CARS exam.
Right. Those are administered by Transport Canada. Passing them is essential to getting your license.
That Reddit post gave us a really great window into preparing for and taking that CARS exam specifically. What were some of the key takeaways from that AME's firsthand account?
Well, their strategy was really rooted in deep engagement with the official CARS for the AME study guide. They recommended reading it multiple times. First, just for overall familiarity, to get the lay of the land, then focusing specifically on doing practice questions to see how the rules were tested, and finally, going back to reinforce any areas they identified as weak through those practice questions.
So practice questions seem really important for them, like critical.
Definitely. They really emphasized that. They supplemented the main study guide with online resources, too, mentioning things like Quizlet flashcards and other online practice tests. Their advice was basically, do as many practice questions as you possibly can. That's key to mastering the material and understanding how to apply the regulations, or just find the right section under exam pressure.
And they had a pretty detailed approach for test day itself, didn't they?
Yes, they did. They suggested writing down any critical memory aids or maybe key regulation numbers right at the beginning before even starting the test questions while it's fresh.
Like a brain dump.
Kind of, yeah. They also stressed taking the time to carefully read every word of each question, maybe trying to classify what type of question it is, application, location, etc. Then, systematically eliminating the obviously wrong answers, and being really wary of questions that might have multiple plausible-sounding answers, making sure to select the one that is most correct according to the precise wording of the regulations. Details matter.
That sounds intense. And after the exam, you get a feedback letter. What's that about?
Yeah, whether you pass or fail, you get this letter. It tells you your result, obviously. But helpfully, if you did miss any questions, it references the specific sections or standards within the CARS where those questions came from.
Well, that's useful.
Very useful. That way, if you unfortunately need to retake the exam, you know exactly which areas you need to focus your studying on. It points you in the right direction.
Okay. So, to try and bring this all together, AMEs are these fundamental guardians of aviation safety, holding that critical authority to certify maintenance work.
Absolutely. That certification is key.
Their daily work is governed by the incredibly detailed Canadian aviation regulations, the CARS, which cover basically everything that flies civilly in Canada, from the smallest trainers to the largest jets.
Right. And the AME license itself has seen some important updates recently, like that shift to a 10-year validity, which reflects efforts to align with global standards and really emphasize ongoing competence.
And their essential duties involve formally releasing aircraft back into service, always using approved data and standard practices, ensuring only approved parts are used, conducting necessary testing, maintaining those critical weight and balance records, and constantly keeping their own knowledge current.
And none of it is possible without that meticulous record keeping we talked about, that precise, permanent history of every aircraft's maintenance life. It's legally required, yes, but it's also fundamental to demonstrating airworthiness over time.
Right. And the system extends beyond the individual AME too, with broader oversight mechanisms. Things like specific maintenance programs for complex aircraft, those rigorous maintenance control systems for airlines.
And that vital safety reporting system like SDRs, which feeds information back into the system and can lead to mandatory actions like airworthiness directives to fix potential problems across a fleet.
And underlying this entire complex framework is a robust system of accountability, making sure that mistakes, and especially intentional rule breaking, have serious consequences, ultimately upholding the trust placed in the AME and the entire aviation system.
Exactly. It's all about maintaining that trust and safety.
All these intricate rules, standards, procedures, systems, wow, they are complex, but it's clear they form the absolute bedrock of the trust that passengers you implicitly place in air travel every single day.
They really are, yeah.
So thinking about the sheer level of detail required here, the constant need for absolute precision, and the, frankly, severe consequences of getting something wrong, how does that regulatory framework fundamentally shape the mindset, the discipline, the very approach an aircraft maintenance engineer takes to their job every day? And maybe stepping back, what unexpected parallels might there be between this incredibly rigid, safety-critical field and other areas in life or work where absolute precision and adherence to a strict rule book are paramount?